Sorry, this table is for family only, my brother smiled, pointing to the little white placard stuck into its silver stand as if it were the law and he had just been deputized by it. The smile wasn't cruel, exactly. It was polite, the kind people wear when they don't intend to make a scene. His hand hovered near my elbow like he might guide me somewhere else if I didn't get the hint. I looked at the card. Family. Block letters, printed by whoever had arranged the banquet. I could see my last name beneath it on a paper seating chart taped to the wall, 10 guests. The table itself was a round island lit by a low chandelier, already ringed with cousins smoothing napkins into their laps, my aunt adjusting a brooch at her collar, my mother's handbag tucked carefully behind her chair like a small animal hiding. An extra chair leaned against the wall nearby, folded as if it had given up the idea of being useful. I am family, I said, softly, almost as an experiment. I didn't make it a challenge. I didn't make it a plea. I just let the words sit there between us, quietly asking to be believed. He kept the smile. You know what I mean. I did. The room knew, too. The room had practiced for hours to look like this, our parents' anniversary, a hotel ballroom that smelled faintly of citrus and old carpet, a rented string quartet sawing cheerfully at standards, a slideshow of scanned photos waiting on a loop near the cake. In those photos, we were crisp as ideas. There we were at the beach, sunburned shoulders, matching plastic shovels. There we were at graduations, in stiff gowns we would never wear again. There we were, each year a notch in the doorframe of memory. And here we were now, him standing like a doorman at the border, me with my coat still on, a gift bag dangling from my wrist, wondering when exactly my last name had stopped working as a key. It's crowded, he added, as if the evidence weren't clear. But there are more tables. Over there. He gestured to the ring of round tables set further out, near the bar. The overflow. The friends of family. The people who wouldn't be in the slideshow's final frames. I wanted to say it wasn't crowded. 2 seats were still empty, place cards tilted toward each other like conspirators. He'd positioned his shoulder just enough to block them from my approach. It was a small skill, that gentle way he had of rearranging space around him. He used to do it in the bathroom when we were kids, standing in front of the mirror for one reason or another, and I would wait with a toothbrush in my hand, inventing patience. I learned then that you can be told to wait without being asked to. My mother saw me first. She half rose, the way she always did when someone she loved walked into a room, but then she sank back into her chair, a careful settling, like something had tugged at her sleeve under the table. She opened her mouth and closed it again. Her eyes darted to my brother, then to the placard, then to me, and I realized that, somewhere in the planning, a decision had already been made. Not today, not here, not at the table that would carry the speeches and the toasts and the pretty parts of history. I felt the weight of the gift bag against my calf. Inside, a framed photo from the year my parents couldn't afford a professional session and asked us to sit still on a picnic blanket while my father propped up his old camera with cookbooks. My brother and I were in collared shirts, sweating, laughing at something that had just missed the frame, a bee, I think, or the neighbor's dog. My mother had loved that day. She'd said it was perfect, not because the photos were good, they weren't, but because none of us were pretending to be anything we weren't. I had wrapped that memory in tissue paper and ribbon like it was enough to fix something. I'll find a place, I said, because there are moments when you choose a smaller loss to avoid a bigger one. I stepped aside so an uncle could pass, shoulders hunched, a man who wore his belt like an argument with himself. The room gathered me as it gathers anyone who walks slowly enough, the clink of flatware, the shiver of glasses, a cousin whispering into a phone with her head bowed like reverence. My brother exhaled. Thanks, he said, as if I had just taken a favor. I chose a table near the edge of the room, within sight but comfortably off the family map. 2 teenagers in suits were trying to balance dessert forks on their noses. A woman in a navy dress introduced herself as a neighbor who sees your folks on walks all the time, adorable. Her voice had the careful pitch people use when they're sure they're being kind. When she asked me how I knew the couple, I said, we share a last name, and watched the sentence rearrange her face. She laughed, too loud, and touched my arm as if to soften her mistake, then turned to admire the flowers. From here I could see the topography of the room without participating in it, the head table set like a stage, the way the light from the chandelier pooled over the family table and thinned toward the walls. I could see my father, flushed with attention, telling a story I couldn't hear but could feel the shape of, his hands drawing the box of a car we used to own, the one that always stalled on hills, his mouth forming the punchline he never got tired of. My mother's laugh reached me like a bird that had learned to fly low, there and gone, vulnerable to draft. I unknotted the ribbon on the gift bag. The frame inside felt heavier than its size should allow. I traced the edge with my thumb. There we were, sunglossed and uncooperative, a family of 4 who had not yet discovered the kinds of disagreements that don't fit into an album. My brother leaned into me in that photo as if we were 2 halves of a sentence. This was before he learned to edit. The first toast came from an aunt who thinks volume equals sincerity. She thanked everyone for being here, on this blessed day, and used our names like a prayer, calling each of us to account. When she said my brother's name, the table murmured the way people do when someone's resume is being recited. When she said mine, there was a slight confusion, a lag, like the soundboard at a concert catching up to a singer. I raised my glass anyway. The teenagers at my table clinked theirs against mine and grinned. One of them asked if I was, like a cousin or something, and I found myself deciding that the simplest way to be understood, tonight, was to be smaller. Something like that, I said. I kept catching my brother's eye by accident. He always has the gaze of someone reviewing a seating chart that only he can see, placing people where they will make the least trouble. Our father loves him for this. Our mother is grateful and then sorry for being grateful. I am practiced at reading these microclimates, the way affection and relief and performance swirl in a family, picking favorites and then pretending the wind was to blame. He looked away first each time. He is good at not making moments when he doesn't want them. The second toast came from my parents' oldest friend. He told the story about the snowstorm that stranded them in a diner overnight before any of us were born. We had nothing but coffee and a broken jukebox, he said, and your mother fell in love with your father because he kept feeding it quarters anyway. My parents held hands under the table. Someone at the family table dabbed at their eyes. At my edge table, the neighbor sighed happily and whispered, "They're so lucky." I thought about luck as a habit instead of a lottery, how some people practice it until it looks like a virtue. I thought about the quarters my father kept feeding into that jukebox, he would turn even a malfunction into a ritual of hope. I thought about the nights after my brother stopped texting back, when my mother set 2 plates on the counter and then put one away, telling herself he'd eaten already. I thought about the last call I'd had with my father where he'd told me to keep your head down for now, the phrase you use when the truth is an inconvenient guest. I ate the salad. I ate the chicken. I let the teenagers trade desserts with a diplomat's wink. When the slideshow began, I carried the gift to the edge of the family table and laid it among the flowers and cards. My mother's eyes widened when she saw the photo. She reached for it like it had remembered her first. "Oh," she said, and it was the kind of "oh" that has a history in it. She touched our faces, one fingertip at a time, and then looked up at me as if she might say something that required both courage and permission. My brother leaned in and said something to her I couldn't hear. She nodded. She set the frame gently behind a centerpiece so it faced the room, not the table. When I returned to my seat, a cousin stopped me in the aisle. "We're doing a family picture after the cake," she said brightly. "You know, just us. Don't wander off." The brightness had iron in it. I could have agreed. I could have asked, which us? Instead, I asked if she remembered the beach photo where my brother fell asleep on my shoulder and drooled so much our mother had to rinse my shirt in the ocean. I finished. My cousin blinked, her smile faltering, the way people do when you hand them a memory they'd never asked to carry. "Right," she said quickly, and slipped back toward the family table without answering. I watched her go. The light from the chandelier turned the tops of everyone's heads into a field of gold. They leaned toward each other in 2s and 3s, an ecosystem of familiarity I could map but not enter. Even my parents, framed in the center, seemed to tilt subtly toward my brother when he spoke, as though he were the interpreter for the rest of us. I returned to my table at the edge. The teenagers were now building towers out of sugar packets, their jackets draped over the backs of their chairs. The navy-dressed neighbor had joined in, laughing like she belonged here more than I did. She glanced at me and said, "They're lining up for the family photo soon." It wasn't an invitation, it was an observation. When the cake came out, 3 tiers, white icing, sugar flowers curling at the edges, the room shifted. People rose, glasses were topped up, chairs scraped back. My father made a short speech about gratitude, about how the years had been full of everything life can throw at you, and how he wouldn't have changed a single moment. My mother smiled with the kind of discipline that comes from holding your breath in front of strangers. Then the photographer's voice rang out, "Family, please." I stayed seated. It wasn't defiance, it was certainty. I'd seen the seating chart. I'd read the placard. This moment was already scripted without me. From my vantage point, I watched them gather at the head of the room. My brother was in the center, flanked by our parents, his arm comfortably across my mother's back. Cousins grouped themselves by height, aunts adjusted collars, an uncle smoothed his tie. The photographer fussed with the tripod, calling out directions. And then, a pause. My mother's gaze swept the room. For a heartbeat, I thought she might wave me over, rewrite the scene in real time. Instead, her eyes landed on the neighbor in navy, who was passing behind the group, and she smiled as if to fill the gap. The flash went off. Once, twice. The moment was sealed. Later, while people danced and the staff cleared plates, I found myself near the dessert table with my brother. It wasn't planned. He'd come for another slice of cake, I'd come for coffee. We ended up shoulder to shoulder, watching the last of the sugar flowers get scraped onto napkins. "You could have been in the picture," he said without looking at me. I took a sip of coffee. "Could I?" He shrugged, as if to say it was up to me. "You were standing there," I said. "At the table. You saw me." His fork hesitated over the cake. "It's complicated." "It's simple," I said. "Either I'm in the family, or I'm not." He sighed, the kind of sigh that pretends to be patient but is really just buying time. "You know how Dad feels." He didn't want tension. The word landed like a pebble in a still pond. Tension. As if I were the variable that made the air hum. As if his role had only been to keep things smooth. "Right," I said finally. "Wouldn't want that." He glanced at me then, a quick flicker of something, regret, maybe, or the calculation of whether I might cause a scene. "It's just one night," he said. "That's how it starts," I replied. The band shifted into something slow, couples drifting onto the dance floor. My parents swayed in the center, my mother's hand light on my father's shoulder. For a moment, they looked exactly like the slideshow, perfectly timed, perfectly placed. I stayed by the coffee, letting the bitterness coat my mouth, watching from the edge as the people in the center kept orbiting each other. When I finally left, I didn't say goodbye to my brother. My mother hugged me quickly, her arms tighter than usual, her cheek cool against mine. "Thanks for coming," she whispered. It sounded like she was thanking me for something else entirely. I didn't go straight home after the anniversary. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the city, letting the lights smear across the windshield, radio low, my thoughts loud. It wasn't just the photo, or the table, or my brother's practiced smile. It was the realization that the exclusion wasn't sudden, it had been building in small, almost invisible increments, each one easy to excuse at the time. 2 weeks later, it was my father's birthday. A smaller gathering this time, just dinner at his favorite restaurant. My mother sent a group text with the details, 6:30, Harrison Steakhouse. Tables already booked. When I arrived, the host checked the reservation. "Ah, party of 6, he said. I looked past him toward the table, 5 people already seated. My brother had taken the chair beside my father, angled slightly so their conversation was closed off from the rest. My mother sat opposite, leaning toward them. An aunt and uncle rounded out the group. I took the open seat at the far end, next to the service station. From here, the clatter of dishes nearly drowned out the conversation. It was too far to catch the thread of the jokes, but I could see the body language, heads tipped together, shoulders touching, forks pausing midair when my brother spoke. The waiter came to take drink orders. My mother said, "We've already got a bottle of red coming, unless you want something else?" The tone was light, but the offer was an afterthought. "I'll stick with water," I said. My brother smirked. "Still not much of a wine person, huh?" It was meant to sound like teasing. It didn't land that way. Over the next hour, the conversation rolled around me like I was a rock in a stream. I caught fragments, my brother's new project at work, my father's plan to fix the deck, an inside joke about a vacation they'd all taken last summer. I hadn't been invited to that vacation. At the time, it had been explained as last minute and just the people who could make it. Now I could see it for what it was, a rehearsal for nights like this, where my absence felt natural. After dinner, as we waited for the check, my father took a folded envelope from his jacket and handed it to my brother. "For you," he said. My brother looked inside, grinned, and tucked it away. "What's that?" I asked, before I could stop myself. Just something we've been talking about, my father said, in the tone of a man closing a door. My brother didn't look at me. Back in my car, I sat for a long time before starting the engine. I thought about how they would describe this evening later: a nice dinner, good wine, Dad's birthday. My presence would be a footnote, if mentioned at all. The smallest cuts are the ones you barely feel when they happen. It's only later, when you see the map of them, that you realize how much you've bled. The next family event was my niece's piano recital. She's my brother's daughter, all long limbs and shy smiles, fingers like quicksilver on the keys. I brought flowers, sat in the middle row of the small auditorium, clapped until my hands stung. Afterward, clusters of families formed in the hallway, all proud voices and camera flashes. My brother stood with his wife and daughter, flanked by my parents. When I approached, my niece smiled and said, "Uncle," but my brother's hand found her shoulder and gently turned her toward another group. It was subtle. Almost nothing. But I felt it. That night, I looked at the framed photo from the picnic blanket, the one I'd given my parents at the anniversary. I wondered if it was still out where the family could see it, or if it had migrated to a hallway, then to a drawer, then to a box. Photos tell you who you were. The spaces around them tell you who you are now. Spring brought my parents' 40th wedding anniversary, a milestone big enough for my mother to rent out the community hall and send printed invitations. The kind that come in thick envelopes with embossed lettering, as if the weight of the paper could make the words mean more. The invitation arrived at my apartment on a Wednesday. My name was printed in the same looping script as everyone else's, but I noticed one thing: no +1 line. It was small, easy to overlook, but it told me what I needed to know. They weren't thinking about who I might bring. The night of the party, the hall was already buzzing when I arrived. Round tables covered in white cloths, centerpieces of roses and eucalyptus, a DJ setting up near the dance floor. Along one wall, a long table displayed framed photographs: my parents' wedding day, birthdays, graduations, vacations. I walked along the table slowly, letting my eyes trace the years. My brother appeared in almost every frame. His kids, his wife, his home. There were photos of me too, but mostly older ones, before the drift began. As if my place in the family had been frozen at some earlier version of myself, before something unspoken redrew the lines. The head table was set for 10. Again. At the center, my parents, with my brother and his family on either side. The rest filled in by aunts and uncles. My place card sat at a table 2 rows back, angled toward the DJ booth. I'd been here before, close enough to watch, far enough to be a part. I didn't move the card. Not yet. Dinner began with speeches. My father stood, thanking everyone for coming, telling stories about his early days with my mother. The room was warm with laughter. My mother's hand rested on my brother's arm during the pauses, her smile turning toward him more often than toward my father. When my brother stood to speak, the applause was louder than I expected. He told stories too, about growing up in our house, about family values, about lessons learned. He made jokes about my father's stubbornness and my mother's cooking, each one landing like a perfect pitch. Then, mid-speech, he glanced in my direction. "You know, our family's always been tight-knit," he said. "We've had each other's backs no matter what. And I think that's why we're all here at the family table tonight." Laughter rippled through the room. It wasn't cruel, it was polite, the way you laugh at something that's supposed to be harmless. But it landed. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I saw a few eyes flick toward me and then away, as if they'd looked somewhere they shouldn't have. After the speeches, people drifted onto the dance floor. I stayed seated, watching couples sway, kids dart between tables. My mother approached, her smile smaller now. "Are you having a good time?" she asked. "It's fine," I said. She hesitated, then added, "I'm glad you came." Her eyes shifted toward the head table, where my brother was laughing with our father. "You know how he is, he just likes things a certain way." "That's one way to put it," I said. Her mouth tightened. "Don't start tonight." I didn't. But something in me shifted. The moment came during the cake cutting. The photographer called, "Family up front." My brother's voice followed, "You know the drill, just the core family." The room moved like it had done this before. My parents, my brother, his wife, their kids. Aunts and uncles stood aside. Cousins leaned on chairs. I stayed seated, but this time not quietly. Core family, I repeated, loud enough for a few heads to turn. My brother froze, knife still in his hand. You know what I mean, he said, trying for that same polite smile from months ago. Yeah, I said. I do. I pushed back my chair, stood, and walked toward the exit. No one stopped me. The DJ's voice filled the gap, let's hear it for 40 years together. The music swelled. Outside, the air was cool and clean. I could still hear the muffled thump of the bass, the laughter spilling into the night. I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, feeling the absence of the weight I'd been carrying inside that room. It wasn't relief exactly. It was more like clarity. It was a week before my brother called. No text first, no small talk. Just his voice in my ear saying, we should meet. We chose a coffee shop halfway between us, neutral ground. Mid-morning, the place smelled of roasted beans and warm bread. A low hum of conversation filled the space, the kind that lets you hide your words if you want to. He was already seated when I arrived, hands folded on the table like he was waiting for a meeting to start. No hug, no smile. Just a nod toward the chair opposite him. I didn't want to talk about this at the party, he began. It wasn't the time. It's never the time, I said. He winced, but didn't argue. Look, you're still my brother. That's not in question. Feels like it's been in question for a while. He leaned back, exhaled through his nose. You make it sound like I'm trying to push you out. I'm not. I'm just keeping things easy for everyone. Easy for who? I asked. Because it's not easy for me. He didn't answer right away. The clink of cups and hiss of the espresso machine filled the space between us. Finally, he said, Dad doesn't like tension. Mom doesn't either. You know that. And sometimes when you're around, things get complicated. I stared at him. Complicated how? Because I don't nod along to everything you say? Because I don't fit into your picture of what the family should look like? His jaw tightened. It's not just about me. Of course it is, I said quietly. You're the one who decides who sits where. You're the one who says, family only, like you get to define it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The barista called out an order. A couple near the window laughed over something on a phone screen. Finally, he said, maybe we just see it differently. Yeah, I said. You see family as the people who make you look good in a photo. I see it as the people who stand next to you whether there's a camera or not. He looked down at his hands. I'm sorry you feel that way. It was the kind of apology that doesn't touch the thing it's supposed to. I didn't respond. We finished our coffee in silence. When we stood, he reached out like he might put a hand on my shoulder, but stopped short. Outside, the day was bright, sharp-edged. He walked one way, I walked the other. That night, I pulled out the old framed photo from the picnic blanket. I set it on my kitchen counter, leaned against the cabinets, and looked at our younger faces, two kids leaning into each other, not yet aware of the lines they'd draw later. It hurt, but it was a good kind of hurt. The kind that lets you know exactly where the wound is, so you can stop pretending it's not there. Maybe one day we'd find our way back to that version of ourselves. Or maybe we wouldn't. Either way, I knew now that family wasn't a table you're invited to, it's the people who make room for you, no matter how crowded it gets. And that table, I decided, was mine to build. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe, have a nice day.